Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the last session of the Asia Economic and Entrepreneurship Summit. I'm Barbara Maynard. I'm the moderator for this session. I am Senior Advisor of the Fung Group. I'm also on the Policy Council of the UNESCAP Sustainable Network, and I'm also co-founder of a company called Horizon Digital, which is engaged in digital green bonds and also sustainable finance as a service. You know, just a few words to set the scene. We have had a very good year in Asia on the green front. China and a number of major countries, Japan, Korea, have set their net zero carbon target. This is important because Asia accounts for 35% of global emissions. That's the largest region by far, and certainly greater than America and Europe. And in order to meet these zero targets, we need substantial funding. We're talking about trillions here. One number that comes up often is 3 trillion a year for the next 30 years. And a lot of that is going to be, this has given the impetus to green finance. And we are seeing accelerated pace in the development of green finance in Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, and many countries in Asia. In fact, both Singapore and Hong Kong now have stated their ambitions and have taken steps to be the green finance hub in Asia. This, in fact, is, and also we are seeing that China itself is gearing up to issue more green bonds because I think for China, the target that they have stated is 1 trillion a year of green bonds. A lot of this money is needed both for cleaning up and also for transitioning into the green economy. We are also seeing banks building up their resources and their team to initiate green bonds and to distribute them. We continue to see good news that the number of bonds, both sovereign bonds and corporate bonds, are rising. And we are also starting to see an experiment in digital green bonds, and that's significant because it expands the market, the sourcing of money from retail investors, which up to now would have difficulty getting into the green bond market. So we have on one side all this good news. On the other side, we have to admit that the progress in Asia is still slow. Asia is still the largest source of untreated plastic, and also Asian consumers are not demanding. They do not ask for labeling on green and sustainability. So there is little pressure on producers to go green. So with this background, I just want to note again that we are in a race against time. To limit global temperature to 1.5%, we need to cut emissions by 50%, to cut emissions 50% by 2030, and to be net carbon neutral by 2050. There's a lot of work to do. So what are we in Asia going to do? This is the subject of this particular panel, which is meeting the challenges of sustainable development towards a green economy. And to address this big issue and all the green questions that were listed just now, I will invite our 5 experts on the panel to share their thoughts and insights with us. I will start with Pamela Ma, who is the Executive Director, Knowledge and Applications of the Fung Academy. Pamela, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Just by way of introduction, I have worked extensively in supply chains trying to basically green them and upgrade them from a social perspective. And what I do today in my allotted time is to first tell you a bit about what we try to do, because the thing is, everybody knows we need to get to net zero by 2050. Everybody knows we need to begin tracking and tracing products. Everybody knows that we have to do a lot better on the energy and water and so on fronts. And what we've tried to do is actually do this in the supply chain. So I just like to share a bit of our experiences and lessons learned so that others can benefit. So basically, the Fung Group runs consumer product supply chains. We don't do electronics, but we do basically all the starter industries for Asian countries. Like we manufacture clothing, toys, furniture, beauty products, all the things that don't require really high amounts of investment and can be done by laborers who are actually untrained, unskilled in that they don't have a university education. So they're all the starter industries. Obviously, energy is a big part of the improvement that Asia needs to make. So we did a lot of energy efficiency training. So training staff how to like what is energy, how do you save energy, and so on. And we also started to put sensors to measure energy in a real-time basis, because you really need to understand where you're using the most energy in order to know where to target in order to become more efficient. So we did a lot of training and equipment upgrades. The second thing, we work with a lot of buyers to design more sustainable products, okay? Because a lot of the products' environmental impact is actually in the choice of material, the choice of how to manufacture it, whether it is easily manufacturable, which determines how many working hours does it take, which drives the price, which drives whether the workers need to overwork, and so on. So we did a lot of work with buyers to try to design more sustainable products. And then we also did a lot about water, because Asia has huge water issues in terms of water security, clean water, water conservation, polluted water, and so on. So water is, like, in addition to what Barbara said about waste, water is really important to our ability to manage our environment resiliently. Okay, so in terms of training, equipment upgrades, these are all the textbook methods for driving environmental improvement in the supply chain. And over the course of several years, I'm just going to share what I think are three kind of lessons, in terms of all of the work. The first is a lot of Asian countries don't have the right regulation in place. Okay, they don't regulate and enforce evenly, because governments are interested in creating jobs and providing an enabling environment for business. And so a lot of governments have interpreted enabling environment to less regulation. Okay, so in the absence of regulation about the environment, the #1 driver of change is economic. Okay, I cannot tell you how many times we've talked about energy and water till we're blue in the face. And basically, if energy is really cheap, which it is, if water is really cheap, if waste is really cheap and that you can pollute and dispose as much as you want without any penalty, then businesses won't have the right incentives to cut back. Okay, and so everybody wants to wake up and be environmentally conscious, save energy, save water, and so on. But if the economic incentives are wrong, and if they can't calculate how am I going to make money off of this energy efficiency program, it won't work. Okay, so the first thing is we really need the right price signals. We need energy to price in the future costs of pollution. We need water. I mean, water prices are just, they are not right. They are not right considering water such a precious resource, and waste as well. The second lesson, a lot of times we just said, oh, well, the government would only regulate, then, our problem will be solved. And I think it's almost like the grass is always greener. Regulation exists in many Asian markets, but it is not enforced. And so companies don't really view it very seriously. They'll pay the fine, which is always quite low. And so, we need to be, and yet we don't want to automatically resort to regulation as the first knee-jerk reaction, because a lot of times regulation increases complexity without the corresponding business benefit. And, we are in ASEAN 10 countries plus, or RCEP 15 countries, 16 countries. And if every country wants to enact its own kind of environmental regulation, it'll be too really complex to run a supply chain which goes through a number of countries. So the key thing about regulation is it needs to be really simple, harmonized, and enforced using data and transparency, and not enforced as a political thing. And I think that's a really hard balance to strike. But it's something that forums like RCEP and so on need to get right. Okay, and we shouldn't just think regulation is going to solve our problem. And I'm in the business sector, so maybe I'm speaking a bit freely about regulation, but anyways, this is my experience. The third and final lesson is that money matters. So we have so many good business plans where there's payback in 1 year from energy efficiency, equipment upgrades, maintenance, and factories and SMEs, they can't get access to finance and they don't have deep pockets. And so we need to work a lot closer with the finance system to free up the flow of finance. Because even if all the economic incentives are there, sometimes the upgrades won't happen. Sometimes the greening won't happen simply because factories don't have an extra $100,000 lying around. And this is a really serious issue because in the emerging markets, the banking system is underdeveloped. And banks, even the local banks, they all want to lend to like the big name companies, GE or Airbus, Samsung, but nobody wants to lend to the SMEs. And yet the SMEs are the one who create the jobs. They're the one who actually make the products. They're the one who actually do the work. So how are we going to partner? How we, as supply chain perspective, going to partner with banks who have the capital? It's not that the capital doesn't exist. The capital is there. It's just that it's not being allocated in a very smart way. So, I think maybe I'll stop there, and I hope this kind of gives us something to kick off the discussion, because we have an opportunity in Asia. We can rewrite the development playbook. We can achieve a green future, but we have to start doing things a lot differently. And actually, I really believe COVID gives us the opportunity, because people are willing, people are open to listening to new ideas. So let's get more of those out there and into the supply chains. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pamela. And thank you for the energizing this whole session with your enthusiasm and all the hopeful note. Yes, of course, we can do it. Let's go to Albert Oung, who is the founder and president of the World Green Organization, Hong Kong. Albert, you have the floor.
Thanks, Barbara. Allow me to just share my views, because I have been working in the environmental green industry business for over 40 years. There are many things that are happening in the past few years, but actually allow me to say that the green economy goes back somewhat about 50 years ago. There's a history of it when the Nobel laureate, Mr. Ernst, who is the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, who advocated the green economy and also green revolution since then. And then in 1989, actually, the green economy and also the sustainable development, these words came out when a group of environmental specialists stated it in reports in the UK to the government. And then probably in 2008, actually, the UNDP has formulated a green economy initiatives, which changed the landscape globally. So in fact, what I'm trying to say is that things are changing, since 50 years ago. So green economy is not just about environment issue. It's about how we learn things, learn from the past and refine and make improvement, including many different issues, including the livelihood, environment issues, and the technology improvement, all these things, that we are talking about. So our findings was the global economy are changing rapidly, even in the pandemic. COVID-19 is only a wake-up call to enhance us to think more rapidly of the changes that we can make. Other than problems, we think it as opportunity to make things change quickly, because there are solutions, there are technical solutions. The most important thing is whether nowadays the green economy we are talking about is the kind of a world trend of how we would like our country to be, targeted as a responsible country who is looking after our people, livelihood, because there is a moral right for all to be born into this world. So each and every country, like the government, whether the government has this kind of mindset. So it's a mindset change of doing good ethically. So I think of all the technology, whether this is a digital economy, whether this is a circular economy, blue economy, all these wordings actually go back to one very important point, is whether we are doing things for the people. And nowadays we are talking about world or global citizen. So we are talking about rights of a citizen, but at the same time, the UN are also talking about rights and responsibilities. So the green economy has somehow evolved into such a stage that all the changes, all the lessons that we have learned, whether we would transform that in a much organized fashion, and we learn from the mistake, but not to make a better mistake again and again, because somewhat men insist on ignoring these lessons. So because we only have a few minutes to talk about this green economy and how it will go further. So reinvestment is somewhat what we are doing now, as what we have just shared. I mean, capital is not lacking in the market. It's only how these capitalists, all these funds are being used in a proper way. So it's about the program that we are doing. Sustainability is about profitability too. So the new notion of what we are trying to do is that we need to be very clear of what we are doing for each and every country, and how regionally that we can do. So the UN ESBN, we have also come up with a number of issues of how to improve the PPP program by doing kind of a new program for regional PPP or global PPP platform. To do issues like the waste or the ocean waste around the world or regionally. And there are many things, because there are new inventions. It depends what we are talking about in applying it. So this is what I think about the whole issue, and that there are rules and regulation and also standards, global standards, certification, measurements. These are all now in place. So what we have to do is to reshuffle, we rethink the way we look at things. And also one of the most important thing is open up our mindset. Don't use the old mindset to meet the future challenges, because it doesn't work. Because most of the people comes in with a prejudgment. We can't do this, we can't do that. These are all calculated, we don't have the money, but we always think about money first. But we don't think about why do we have to do that? If we want to achieve certain objective, You know, even now we're talking about the climate change, all these challenges. What went wrong in our economy, and what kind of marginal improvement or even a comprehensive improvement that the country can make, and what are the cooperative program that we can do with regionally and globally. So the UNESCAP, you know, even are working towards that. That's why we have somewhat conducted a report, a green paper on Asia Pacific Green Deal, which we will address and share it with our friends. And we will also set up workshops and a lot of down-to-earth practical solutions. So I think this is what the challenges that we are facing now is the mindset change. There are solutions, things are there, you know, all the solutions are, technical solutions are there. It's just how we're going to apply, think out of the box. So this is what I would like to share today. Thank you.
Thank you. That is very insightful. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have two views that have been presented to us. One is about mindset, which is what Albert just presented. And the other is that a lot would depend on the economics, pricing, and incentive structure. So I will now go to the Shazali Sulaiman, who is the chairman of the Brunei International Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Shazali, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hi, Barbara. Long time no see. We only see each other, you know, visibly enough these days.
Delighted to see you here.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for the invitation to speak and also to KSI. Mine is an observational view. I think you know my background. I'm a chartered accountant and also a professor at the university, lecturing in taxation and auditing. So I think my view will probably be around those topics. I'm actually in London now. So good afternoon and good morning to all of you. And one of the surprising things that I found about coming to London is there's a lot of consciousness about the green environment. Everywhere you go, it's green. They talk about zero carbon emission and everything else. And I found out as well that if you drive an EV or electric car in London, you do not have to pay congestion charges. And the parking fee section, for parking is only about 20% of the normal cost of a normal car. And prior to this, I was lecturing, doing my lectures online with my students at the university. And one of the topics that I covered was tax incentive. And it talked about low carbon emission cars. And if you have a high carbon emission cars, which emit more than 110 grams per kilometer of carbon CO2, then you're subjected to 15% penalty in terms of the lease payment and all the payments that you make in excess of that amount. So there are incentives, tax incentives in the UK, which encourages people to go green and to be more conscious about environmental factors. And to me, sometimes business people are bad at telling people about the environment. And how do you educate the whole population about how to be conscious about the environment? And one of the things that I noticed in the UK, and being a very avid supporter of the English Premier Football League, recently, if you know English football, Tottenham played against Chelsea last week, and it was designated as #Game0. And it is actually the first football game in the UK that was branded as Game0. And its ambition was to show a net zero emission, carbon emission. And basically, I think using sports as a channel to educate and to highlight about the green environment, I think is something that is quite good, because a lot of people associate themselves with sports, not necessarily football, but baseball, basketball, and a lot of other things. And I think the Olympics also talk about zero carbon as well. So I think if we educate people through sports, something that people are passionate about the environment, I think then we can get the message through to the general public rather than getting the business people to do it, because business people only talk about profit. And sometimes some of the environmental issues and some of the, I think, protocols that you need to put in place to be compliant with the environment may be more expensive, I think, than the conventional method. So I think and I think that's mentioned by the panelists as well, the SMEs are important in terms of the growth of the environment, the growth of the business. And just like in Brunei, we have excessive cash liquidity, but unfortunately, the funds, the banks are not actually funding SMEs. And even if you want to go into environmental friendly business, the banks are not funding because they're looking at your business plan, your projection, and feasibility studies. I think coming from an accounting background, one of the things that the International Financial Reporting Standard Foundation is looking at is enhancing corporate reporting to ensure that in your financial statements, in your financial reportings, you do have standardized reportings on your carbon emission, on your corporate social responsibilities, and in terms of your sustainability development goals as well, how it's been achieved and how you're trying to achieve the different 17 goals, I think, that your organization is operating in. And I think one of the key things that we're looking at in terms of accelerating or trying to accelerate sustainability reporting in terms of inclusiveness is to ensure that there is global collaboration, because you don't want to have different kind of reporting standards for different countries, and where you can tailor make the reporting in such a way that it is to your benefit and you don't actually report everything else. Regulation is a bit fragmented. I think Pamela mentioned something about regulation. I think we need to have a standardized regulatory format. Brunei, as the chair of ASEAN this year, I think we have addressed some of the United Nations, the UN SDGs. I believe that the ASEAN 2025 plan includes some of the objectives that the UN has in terms of its 2030 objectives from the sustainability reporting and foundation. So regulatory is very important, but we need to have standard set regulation for all the ASEAN countries, in particular, since we are looking at this region. But at the same time, it should also be extended to us Asia as well, China and all the other countries. And I think the important thing with the enhancing corporate reporting is to ensure that we focus on public sector transparency and integrity. I think it's very important to have proper public sector information in terms of their objectives, their policies, and how they aim to achieve zero carbon emission, and to ensure that the green environment that they're trying to promote is not detrimental to the SMEs and to the business sector. I think it's important to have good tax incentive for companies that are willing to at least move and transform their business into a much more environmental friendly. But one of the big, I think, to me, the key factors, I think, in terms of all this, as I mentioned earlier, apart from using sporting events that are quite popular among the young people, is the education system. The education system is important to have a consistent education system, which talks about what SDG is, what the green environment is, what all this carbon emission has in terms of the impact on the environment. I was just doing a bit of a search, and I was looking at the carbon emission trading system. I mean, it's where countries, rich countries or rich companies actually buy carbon credits. I think they cannot meet the certain carbon emission threshold. And to me, I think we should be a bit more stricter in terms of this carbon trading system, because it still encourages rich countries to be able to still pollute the environment because they can buy the credits. And as such, there might not be any urgency for them to actually go into the Kyoto Protocol and all the other protocols that have been promulgated in terms of reducing your gas house impact over the next 20 years. I mean, there are some highly polluted countries that are not actually part of the protocol. So it's one thing having ASEAN, Asia, China, and everybody else to try and comply with this, but when you have a lot of other countries having their own rules or not wanting to comply, then we have inconsistency in terms of how we address environmental issues. Fortunately, in Brunei, 72% of our country is tropical jungle, so we have quite a good carbon sink in the sense that we, and also when we look at the housing development in Brunei, where the government is trying to ensure that 86% of the population can own properties, we still ensure that only 24% of the land area is used for housing development. And we do not disrupt the tropical jungle that we have. And for 58% of the tropical jungle is actually designated as a protected jungle area, part of the Heart of Borneo project. So the government has taken a lot of initiative and incentive to ensure that we do address some of these environmental issues. One of the biggest, I think, hang on, let's have a look. In terms of globally, I mean, Brunei only accounts for 0.025% of total greenhouse gas emission. And 99% of our power is generated by natural gas. So as part of government policy, obviously, we're looking at renewable energy and to reduce the reliance on gas to only 70% by 2035, sorry. So by 2035, we hope that at least 30% of the energy in Brunei will be renewable energies. So the government has set up a high-level committee to look at the renewable energies and to look at how we can reduce total dependency on the hydrocarbon that we have at the moment. Obviously, Brunei is a hydrocarbon-rich country, so it is quite cheap. But at the same time, I mean, if gas prices increase, then carbon is an unfortunate alternative. But you know what carbon is like, and it's a high emission of carbon. So it is something that we're not looking at. But certainly, we're quite strong in solar, and also we're looking at photovoltaic panels and other renewable energies. So I think the important message I want to put through is, one, education, good collaboration and consistency in terms of reporting, and having proper global financial reporting in terms of how you report your sustainability, your sustainable development goals in your own country and in your own corporation, to make sure that there is consistency. Then we can compare like with like in terms of the figures that have been presented by companies and by countries itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Shazali. Yeah, you know, in terms of reporting, I know of technology and research companies that are setting up platforms as a service, so that companies and also bonds and so forth could simplify their reporting and tracking and tracing. And I think it's a matter of years before that will become standard, because once you have such a platform, you can then input even varying regulations onto the platform, and that reduce the cost. You know, I was very interested to hear about Brunei, and I hope that Brunei will be the second Asian country that could be carbon neutral, because you know that Asia already has one country which is carbon neutral, and that's Bhutan. So let's see which will be the second country. Our next speaker is Arina Koch, Partner Assurance and Climate Change and Sustainability Services, Ernst & Young. Arina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Laura. So good afternoon, everyone. What I wanted to share today was very much on a different context and more of, you know, what we're seeing in Malaysia or ASEAN. So I lead the Climate Change and Sustainability Services in EY, Malaysia, supporting the ASEAN region as well. Now, what we have seen from the market, especially from the corporate's perspective, is climate risk, climate change is really gaining up the agenda for most organizations, but in a very differentiated manner. So what we're seeing is, for large sectors who have areas of emissions, especially in the oil and gas and utility sector, they are very much focused to look at how emissions are critically measured. Second part is they're also looking at phasing out the brown assets such as coal plants. There has been very clear focus from the foreign investors to actually demand for strategy to decarbonization, understanding what is the resilience of the business when talking about, you know, what green or the climate scenarios of future look like for them. So with that respect, you know, we do believe that different sectors are going to mobilize in a different manner, but all with the same purpose of the having that clear green direction, or embracing the concept of circular economy. Now, why do I mention that is when we look at the ways of, let's say we take on a utility company, and in Malaysia, we have seen Tenaga Nasional Berhad about a month ago, who has committed on their aspiration on net zero by 2050. Now, what's interesting is that kind of commitment has to come with quite a number of action plans detailing of what it means for every decade, 2030, 2040, 2050, what does it look like? And that's really critical, because having a commitment without action, goalpost, and pivoting the business plan will not work in this day of age. Investors are demanding for tangible detail of what, you know, the business model will drive. So with that respect, you can see that even only for the utility sector, there has been a number of significant, not just climate risks, but opportunities in relation to the green economy that came arising from this transition. One we see is electrification, what we see is smart metering, the institutionalization of certain mechanisms to look at what are the renewable energies, rooftop solars, and where we've seen Tenaga has also came out is really to work with partnerships with SOCAR, DHL, on having the EVs infrastructure in place as well. So EV infrastructures are not new in Malaysia, but if we want to look at it from an economic standpoint and a very viability business case viewpoint, about I think as early as 4 to 5 years ago, Petronas and Tenaga has already partnered to put on EV charging stations. But I think all of us have to recognize that to drive a real viability or economic of scale is to ensure there are periodic and structured charging of EVs, and there is that supply and demand flow that happens on a coordinated manner. So it wouldn't work if you do not have that volume of demand and supply that matches the business model. So I think it's really a good pivoting. So I think what we've seen, at least for the case of Tenaga, is recognizing the multiple trials and runs, you know, not just putting EVs for consumers. They've also moved on to make sure that, you know, to scale, you need partnerships, you need coordinated charging, you need having that full end-to-end infrastructure, having the ensuring there are vehicles, EVs that comes into Malaysia and being monitored. So that's just one aspect that, you know, it takes coordinated and a lot to get things done. And I would say that most of these success stories comes with a long list of trials, failures, and reset of some of the, you know, strategy. But what we are seeing then is, where do the organizations move on from here on? Now, we know that the Malaysian government has already outlined in their RMK that was announced this week, that the Malaysian government is already committing to, you know, aspiring to be a carbon neutral by 2050. And that is really to rally the whole of nation approach to take on that commitment and pivot, and recognizing that without a clear strategy, there will, you know, be challenges in attracting foreign direct investments. So with that respect in mind, the question then we talk about supply and demand. What do we have as a country? What are the core foundation of our business? We do have a very strong manufacturing plantation. We do have energy utility, robust resources. But what are the forward-looking economies that we aspire to drive, considering the energy transition scenario? Now, and that narrative is really important, because that would essentially drive business resilience. If businesses continue to operate as business as usual, it's a matter of looking at some sectors or the businesses will be in the sunset industry. For example, like coal would be a sunset industry if there is no technology to actually drive efficiency or pivot away from inefficient or high emissions energy source of utility. Now, with that in mind as well, there has been increased focus, as what the earlier panelists all have said. How do we then measure emissions? How do we ensure that polluters pay? There are good mechanisms in place. What we've seen in just our neighboring country in Singapore, they have implemented carbon tax since 2019, $5 per ton for emissions that is above 25,000 tons CO2 annually. Now, those are organizations that has already got on board, and they understand that it's, now whatever they emit, as long as they exceed a certain level of emissions, you have to pay tax. And we've also seen not just Singapore, but we've seen the EU come up with the cross-border adjustment mechanism, which will be effective 2023. And that's when it will cover, for all imports into the EU. That is where they're going to evaluate the efficiency of the produce and the imports, and they're going to put a tax on it if the home country doesn't have a carbon tax mechanisms. So in short, no one is going to run away if they still wish to actually do business or trade in the international waters. So when we talk about
Arina, can you take 1 minute to wrap it up, please?
Sure. So what in that sense, when you look at that, where the national agenda is going to move, there will be very much significant opportunities in driving the low carbon economy. So Asian Development Bank has already outlined that there are 5 green growth opportunities that will require over $171 billion US worth of capital expenditure within our region. And where are these 5 areas? Clean energy transition, circular economy models, sustainable urban development and transport models, productive and regenerative agriculture, healthy and productive oceans. And this would essentially create 30 million jobs in ASEAN by 2030. So with that in mind, I think the key thing is we all know that there is a lot of policies the government has put in place, not just on carbon tax, which was announced that there will be a carbon tax and internal carbon pricing being developed for Malaysia. Second part is we already have a no plastic roadmap.
I really have to ask you to end, please. I have another speaker.
Sure.
And we're running out of time. So thank you very much. And thank you for pointing out to us the opportunity, because we have focused so much on the problem. Anyway, we come to the final speaker, which is who is Arina Jani, Director for Business Development, Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Center. Arina, you are the final speaker of the final session of the day. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. I hope that I'll be interesting enough for that everyone can stay back for this final session and the final speaker.
You have a number of people staying back to hear you. So go ahead.
Okay, that's very good. Okay, thanks. I think first of all, I would like to thank KSI and also the organizers for inviting me as a speaker for this session today. I think very engaging session. The discussions are very, integrating many aspects and also facets of the discussion. A lot of the earlier speakers talk about the challenges and also risk in meeting climate change efforts towards a greener economy. But I think I would take a different angle to the session today. I'll talk about opportunities. So I think more opportunities in this space in sustainable development, in green technology, green economy. I represent Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Center, MGTC for short. We are a government agency under Ministry of Environment and Water, and we are the government agency that's championing green economy for the nation. So this COVID-19 pandemic, right? It does give a lot of hardships to a lot of people, but at the same time, there's areas of opportunities. There's always a silver lining that you can see in any situation that we face globally. United Nations Chief Secretary Antonio Guterres urged governments to use economic responses to coronavirus pandemic to tackle even the deeper emergency of climate change. Where taxpayers' money is used to rescue businesses, it needs to be tied to achieving green jobs and sustainable growth. So how do we then look into the kinds of opportunities in this space? To look into, everybody's talking about green, everybody's talking about sustainable development goals, but actually deep down on the ground, what are the opportunities that's available there? How do people collaborate for a greener Asia? I think that's a key question that we want to ask today. First of all, a lot of the items also focus on the government's objectives, government's belief and faith, whether sustainable development and green economy, can it be a mainstream agenda for the country? So I think that's the first item that's very key to look into the kind of opportunities that are there. Luckily for us, for the government of Malaysia, green has been or sustainable development has been a green agenda since at least 2009. It could be a little bit on and off in terms of budget announcements, but it's always there. It's a mainstay, and we are glad that the government is supportive of this initiative. So the support comes in terms of green technology financing schemes. We've started the first scheme in 2010, where we provide a rebate, an interest rebate to SMEs when they get loans and debt financing, but at the same time also providing the guarantee to the financial institutions that are the panel banks in green technology financing scheme in Malaysia. So far, the first scheme and the second scheme proved very profitable. I think we raised over 3 billion ringgit in the first scheme and also 2 billion ringgit in the second scheme to look into financing green projects in Malaysia. But other than that, we also look upon incentives. What are the carrots that you can do? Because as you are all may be aware, there's no existing act on climate change in Malaysia. So that's where the awareness is very important, and then the education is very important, but at the same time, the encouragement for people to start in this space, in green economy. So we provide investment tax allowance and also income tax exemptions to manufacturers and service providers in this space. So I think tax incentives are always very good. And I think it's always there to actually support the industry and then see how best that we can actually facilitate the growth of green economy. Other than that, the utilization of green technologies and green solutions. How can green solutions and clean energy assist sustainable development with the government support, with the government incentives? Then where would be the opportunities that lie in which sector? So typically in Malaysia, under Green Tech Malaysia, we look at sectors with the highest greenhouse gas emissions. Typically, the most significant industry is manufacturing in Malaysia, and then we also have definitely the energy sector, building and construction, and then also we have waste sector, water sector. So these are the sectors with the highest emissions, but also the highest opportunity or growth area for green economy. So this is where you look at these sectors and then see what are the kinds of green technologies that these sectors, the industry players in these sectors can invest to look to reduce their emissions, but at the same time also aligning to the national agenda and also the planet's agenda. So I think that's one of the items that's very important to look into, the right kind of technologies to invest in, and then also looking at the right kind of business models or implementation mechanisms that can be utilized, that's available. As mentioned by Arina previously, there's a lot of available mechanisms in Malaysia that helps people to justify their business models and also their investments in Malaysia. So the other part that's also very important in terms of opportunities is Sustainable Goal Development Goal number 12, which is sustainable consumption and production. So when you look at that aspect, we are supporting the producers, where we're supporting the manufacturers, service providers in terms of income tax exemptions, but we are also providing that investment tax allowance to the buyers, to the consumers. So any corporate organizations, even government agencies that pay corporate tax to IRB be in Malaysia, you can actually get that offset from the investment tax allowance from the investment that you make for that particular year. So incentives must be both sides to encourage the producers, but also at the same time to the consumers. But however, at this point in time, you know, compared to the UK, as mentioned by Shazali earlier, and then also by the others, the incentives for the rakyat or the citizens are still not there in place in Malaysia. So this is where we hope that there's a lot more support and also a lot more demand and awareness among the citizens that actually push that agenda to the government as well. So this is one of the areas that green procurement and also green purchase, we are all consumers on a daily basis. We consume food, we consume products. So this is where green procurement is in line with the change of mindset that, you know, you're not just greenwashing, you're not just talking about green, but you're actually walking the talk. So this is very important part that each and every one of us can do things here. The other initiative that we do, that we see opportunities in Malaysia, is that we promote low carbon cities initiative. So how to collaborate in the greater Asia. There's a lot of countries in Asia that actually has done this initiative, and then we mirror some of the countries that's from Europe as well. The low carbon cities in Malaysia is actually looking at 154 city councils in Malaysia, how they can reduce their carbon emissions. As you know, by 2030, a lot of the population, 70% of the population will be living in cities. So basically how cities can start from now to actually reduce their emissions. So this is also something that we promote city councils to be part of the initiative to do low carbon initiatives. And then of course, when you talk about public-private partnership, as mentioned by Mr. Albert also earlier, this is where public-private partnership is now something that is a common sense. You need to do it. It's not, there's no longer the time where everybody's depending on the government for funding, depending on the government for grants. This day and age is that everyone can play a role. This is where, for example, the city's component that I was mentioning just now, the city has a problem statement. This is where private sector investments can come into cities. So this is where the big boys, public listed companies, multinational companies, basically everyone collaborating to come together with potential solutions to solve a climate change problem, to solve an environmental problem. So this is where the change of mindset also comes with an action, but also comes with a collaborative spirit. I think that's the most important part, that you look into this space to look into how people can get on board in terms of pushing for green economy. And then the other item that I want to talk about, the future or the emerging trends in green technology, might be an interesting topic with this COVID-19 and pandemic. Even what we're doing right now, everybody's going virtual, right? So that's where there's no more excuse not to be able to create awareness and education. So this is where that using virtual platforms, there's always opportunity for groups of youth, groups of SMEs, groups of industry players, governments, stakeholders. Everybody can actually come together to create that awareness, help educate each other, and then also potentially find areas that we could network and also partner in terms of PPP or even public participation as well. So this is where emerging technologies, in a way that we change and innovate our daily lifestyles as well, to leverage on a lot more virtual platforms. And then also one of the emerging technologies that was pretty interesting for Malaysia, the other speakers will talk about electrification earlier. We may or may not realize that Malaysia is behind Thailand and Indonesia right now in terms of electrification. So this is where we want to foresee that we want to focus on a new technology where we are looking into hydrogen economy. So a lot of the nations, especially from Europe and also Japan, China and Korea, they're looking at hydrogen economy. There's actually a lot of potential in hydrogen production within the region, but at the same time, there's a need and also collaboration spirit to come together to look into the kinds of technologies to lower the pricing for hydrogen per kilogram, and then to be able to store it, to be able to transport it to off-takers, potential off-takers in the energy space for power consumption, but as well as in mobility and transport space. So I think there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of ways that governments and also stakeholders are trying to address those challenges. There's a lot of risk, of course, in this space, because it's an emerging industry. It's a very nascent industry, even in certain countries. But at the same time, there's always opportunities that you can see lying at every corner of the conversation, and that's where we welcome the partnerships. Thank you, Barbara.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, all the participants. We do have time for questions. I like to post one, and I like these to be addressed to all the speakers. Okay, and the question is, if there's one thing you can ask government to do to green the economy, what would that be? One thing that you ask the government to do. Can I again start with Pamela, and we go in the same order?
Yeah, I'm going to divide it into something immediately and quantitative, and then something on the policy space. So the immediate and quantitative thing is raise the price.
We're going to ask for two then.
Okay, well, yeah, you're going to get you get two for the price of one.
All right, all right.
So,
go ahead.
one is raise the price of electricity to take into the future costs of dealing with it, of dealing with the emissions created, or give set a deadline for converting to more renewable. So its function is the same thing. One is at the company level, one is at the consumer level, and then the government itself, but the head of the government, the president or the prime minister, should speak more frequently about climate change. Don't just leave it to the environment minister. Everybody knows what the environment minister thinks. What we want to know is there leadership and is there a commitment coming from the top?
Thank you. Thank you. Good. Shazali? Okay, let's go Shazali. Sorry, I'll come back to you later, Albert. Shazali, yes.
Very short.
No.
Double tax relief for companies that embraces the green technology and move towards the green economy.
I don't have it. Okay, right.
Okay, that's short and sweet. All right, Albert.
My proposal would be, if you are a city or if you are a country, I mean, the most important thing is to lead all the citizens, all the people to know what you're trying to do. So probably is to make your city an international or kind of a green city, so that people know what the government wants to do and all your policy, and there can be a movement of working towards that very distinctive objectives. So going green is something that we need to unite all the people in a very organized fashion. So this is what my recommendation would be, because everything will get in place if if the government state such kind of objective or making it green. So yeah.
Okay.
And this is a holistic approach that we hope to encourage social, environment, and economically. We are providing integrated solution, and this is what the government can provide.
Excellent, thank you. Arina, back to you.
Hi, I think what I would recommend is something tangible and fast, hopefully in the next 1 to 2 years. I would have a call for the government to have an open, centralized emission repository database that is available to public, and all the key leaders who have emissions data will kickstart with a phased reporting before you get to the down to the ground. And this is not new. Australia already has this, and it makes it easier for everyone to tackle with clear emissions data. So if the government can actually roll out the centralized open source data to actually have emissions from all levels, I think we're going to make progress in the next 1 to 2 years. Thank you.
Is that just the national data, or would you seeing it being shared with other countries?
So it is all corporates in Malaysia. So it's not a national data. It is one that you can actually, corporates will voluntarily put in first before you make it mandatory. Because in Australia, when the government made it mandatory and everyone have to put it, the banks were able to calculate finance emissions. All sectors were able to start calculating scope 3 emissions. So that is very critical to ensure that organizations will start to report emissions in a centralized manner. And no one needs to go 10,000 places to compile data. Just go to one stop center by the government, get that, and when it matures, get it audited, that will help carbon tax mechanism moving forward. So 1 or 2 years.
Thank you. Arina, what is the one thing that you would ask government?
So this is based on a personal opinion. So I think facing the the day-to-day challenges that we face in this sector, right? I think my one message would probably be to embed sustainability across all government ministries, laws, and regulation. So regardless of road transport law or solid waste law or whatever, embed sustainability across all government ministries so that the government is one voice on all fronts when it comes to sustainability. So I think that one is one thing that, if we are all guided by one purpose and also one voice in terms of our initiatives, I think it will cascade down top to bottom very easily to the people. Thanks.
Okay, great. I think this is good fun. So I'm going to go for one more question to all the speakers. And this time I'm going to start the other way. So Arina, we're going to start with you. And the question is, if there's one thing you wish to tell business what it can do to contribute to greening the economy, what would that be?
Yeah, so
one thing that you can tell business.
Yeah, so I think for the business and industry players, I guess the first part of the message will probably be that when you are a sustainable leader or you are a sustainable business owner, you are a long-term business owner. You're long-term thinking. So I think that's the first part of the message that I want to communicate, is that nowadays it's like no longer I do not want to do green because I don't feel that I don't want to invest in this space. No, when you don't do anything now, you are actually a short-term business leader. So this is one of the first part of the message that I want to do. And then also the second part of the message is that it's actually a lot more profitable to do green at this point in time for businesses and industry players. There's a lot of ways that you can offset your tax via going green. There's a lot of ways that you don't need to invest in capex. There's a lot of models that third-party investors can come in to invest. And then there's a lot more profitability that you can see in the long run via your operational expenditure. So I think that's the message that I will give to industry players. Thanks.
Thank you. Arina?
So for industry players, so for industry players, I would ask for one thing, and I keep it simple again. Share your decarbonization strategy with clear targets and milestones. Now, once you have a quantitative climate targets, naturally, it will actually, it will force you to communicate your strategy. Without any clear targets, you're not going to move. So what we have seen is organizations who have set clear targets, it's a rally of whole of organization to innovate. So I would encourage all companies or corporates to actually set their target and rally that action, and innovation cut across the all parts of the organization. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, we go back to Albert.
Okay, thank you. What I would say to the business sector would be a visionary green business leader. The green business model that one can do is you can enjoy transforming your business in a long-term basis, sustainably, in a sense that you're doing goodness, you can do kindness and also righteousness at the same time. You will enjoy it and making good to the world. And there are many very successful business model and cases that we can learn from. And such transformation can add the competitive edge and for each and every corporations to brand themselves positively. So I think this is somewhat a new green business notion of being a green entrepreneur that will help. Thank you.
Thank you. Shazali, as an accountant?
No, I'll talk as a grandfather.
As a grandfather, but that's even better. Wonderful.
Yeah, my daughter just gave birth to a son, so I have a grandson. And when I look at my grandchildren, if you don't do anything, and if we don't do anything now to take care of the environment, our future generation will really suffer from all the calamity of climate change. So I think it's important that we pass the message that we need to do something now to protect the future generation.
Thank you. Pamela, you have the last word.
Thank you. So in this, there will be many different stakeholders telling you what you need to do. The governments, your investors, the public, consultants, and so on. Don't listen to any of them as your starting point. First of all, ask you who you want to be. Okay, what is going to be your competitive advantage and your contribution to sustainable economy in the future? And then it's okay if you don't have a grand design about what that looks like. But if you know what is in like your DNA, who do you want to be? And then even if you don't have a grand design, just go get started. Okay, start with data and start learning about your enterprise, and then just reshape your thinking. So that's it.
Thank you. I got a message from one of our participants, Maggie Goss, to everyone that, you know, we motivate is to engage your employees. I think you can all read that, and I think that's very important. Yeah, engage your employees. Thank you, Maggie. You know, it now just behoves me as the last part to thank all the participants. You know, I've been in this conference, in this summit, the whole day from the beginning to now. As we transit, Michael, it's been a really great summit with many wonderful panels. But I was saying this is the best. So thank you to every one of you that enabled me to saying that we've just had the best session. Michael, would you like to say a few words to conclude the summit, please?
Basically, just to thank everyone for contributing. I think all your sharing has been very insightful, very useful, and I hope it will be useful pointers for our participants as well. And I'm delighted to have all of you to take time off your very busy schedule to join with us this afternoon. Some of you have stayed for the whole day. Thank you very much for that time commitment. We look forward to engaging further with you in the months and years ahead. So thank you very much. I'd like to pass back to my colleague Zaim to make the concluding remarks. Zaim.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Thank you to the panel, especially to the moderator, Ms. Barbara Menard, for such a vigorous and enlightening session. We know she didn't have just one round, but 2 rounds of questions. And I think I'd like to commend Barbara for being a stern moderator. It's been a while since I've seen a moderator that, you know, took control of the discussion and made sure that it was it was educational and insightful, at the same time entertaining for everyone. So thank you to the panel as well. Pamela, Shazali, Albert, Arina, and Alina, thank you so much for your time and for sticking with us all the way to the very end. Well, I like to think that you stick to the very end. So thank you for being with us. This has been an amazing summit. We've had a total of 290 people that have registered as participants, 29 speakers, 4 sessions, 2 special addresses, 1 summit. And we begin the summit with the welcome speeches by Tan Sri Malkayu, President of KSI, and Mr. Andrew Weir, Chairman of Pacific Basin Economic Council, followed by the opening keynote address by the Honorable Datuk Seri Haji Fadilah bin Haji Yusof, the Senior Minister and also the Minister of Works from Malaysia, where he spoke about building sustainable infrastructure for economic growth. This was followed by a session 1 on Asia Economic and Investment Outlook, which was superbly moderated by the Venerable Datuk Seri Balrauta, and then it was followed by a special ambassadorial session on the Indo-Pacific and RCEP and everything else in between, which was very interesting to have many ambassadors and also different foreign reps to talk about the topic. And then we had a special ministerial address on parliamentary and legal reforms towards enhancing governance and economic prosperity by the Honorable Datuk Seri Dr. Haji Wan Junaidi bin Tuanku Jaafar, the Minister in the Prime Minister's Department in charge of Parliamentary and Legal Affairs. And then we had lunch. And then we had session 3 on challenges of the digital economy in Asia, trends, opportunities, and risks. And finally, we had that session just now, which was on meeting the challenges of sustainable development towards a green economy. So I'd like to thank all of you for spending the whole day with us. I'd like to thank all the role players, the moderators, the speakers, the special guests, the people behind the scenes. Thank you all for being with us all the way from 9 a.m. and all the way now with at 4:30 p.m. So it's been a long but fruitful day. On behalf of KSI Strategic Institute for Asia Pacific, I'd like to thank our co-organizers, the Pacific Basin Economic Council and also China Daily. I'd like to thank our corporate partners, Tun Razak Exchange, TRX, European Wellness Group, Protect Health Corporation, Sdn Bhd, Eka Malaysia, SFY Group, Jumbo, Global Industries. And, we have come, unfortunately, to the end of the Asia Economic Entrepreneurship Summit, AEES 2021. Don't worry, there'll be another one next year, as we always do with these events on an annual basis. If you'd like to be involved, especially to the role players and also to the participants, if you'd like to see more of KSI events, which I think you should, no bias here, please visit our website, www.kasi.asia. For the next event, we have actually an event happening every week for the next few weeks. So go to our website, kasi.asia, and look for those events and join us. Until then, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.